Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Jay's Fit Down podcast. I'm your host, Jay Gay, and today I'm here with Dave Cohen. He's the voice of the Panthers on the Georgia State University radio, sports radio network there. So we're glad to have Dave on to talk about Georgia State football and give us some insight into there. Dave, thank you for joining us today.
A pleasure. Appreciate you having me on. Always good to come on and talk a little Georgia State athletics.
Yes, sir. Of course. I am a Panther student, as you guys probably can see. Most of my viewers know that I do attend Georgia State. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do this year. But Dave, so just talk about this, man. Football wise, we go 4-8 last year. Not the best season, but just some takeaways from this past season that you could give us here on the podcast.
Well, I think last year caught a lot of people off guard because you remember 2 years ago. We won 8 games after getting off to like a 1-4 start, really finished strong down the stretch, ended up beating Ball State in the Camellia Bowl on Christmas Day over in Montgomery in a convincing win. Everybody coming out of Montgomery in that bowl win was very optimistic going into last season, myself included, because we had so many starters back. Off the 8-win team, and you looked at the schedule and you thought, well, this is a schedule where we could go from 8 wins to maybe 9 wins. Who knows, maybe 10 wins. Right. So there was that feeling of optimism around Georgia State football going into last year. And there were bumps in the road early on, and there are 2 games in particular, actually 3 that kind of are, as I told Coach Elliott, the kind of games that keep me up at night. Me, not him. And, one of them was the loss to Charlotte at Center Park Stadium. I remember at one point they were 1-7, and their only win was against us. And it was a great football game if you were just a college football fan and you like a lot of offense. They came into Atlanta and they beat us 42-41, but it was what I call a woulda, coulda, shoulda. We woulda, coulda, shoulda won that game. Same thing with the North Carolina game. It's the first and only Power 5 that we've managed to bring into Center Park Stadium. And it was a game that we could have won, and it would have made for an even greater weekend for the Sun Belt. That's the weekend that Marshall beat Notre Dame, Appalachian State went on the road and beat Texas A&M, Georgia Southern beat Nebraska, and we almost beat North Carolina. I mean, that would have that might have been the best weekend ever of non-conference football for the Sun Belt. But we couldn't get it done. And then the other one was the loss at home, again, at home to Louisiana Monroe with a blocked punt that was recovered for a touchdown and a pick 6. And as I've said a couple of times, you just win 2 of those games. If you beat Charlotte like we should have and you beat Louisiana Monroe like we should have, we would have had our 6 wins. We would have been in a bowl game more than likely. And the shock of a 4-8 season never would have happened. It would have been a 6-6 season and a possible bowl win to go 7-6 instead of dropping to 4-8. So, for me in hindsight, it was kind of a missed opportunities season coming off the 8-win season 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Who would you say are some players that, stood out to you amidst this, this past season, this, I guess you could say, shocker of the season? Who were some guys that you think stood out to you covering the team and had a great year and look forward to seeing them next year?
Well, I always remind Coach Elliott it was the first interview that I did with Coach Elliott the day he was hired. He emphatically told me, we are going to run the football and we are going to run it successfully. And by golly, and I never doubted him, he certainly has backed that up, because in the last couple of years, Georgia State in FBS football statistically has been a top 10 running offense in college football. I'm not saying we could get in and run with the Power 5s. I'm just saying statistically, we've been a really good running football team, anchored by Tucker Gregg, obviously, and he's a great story after coming to Georgia State as a walk-on out of Chatsworth. And Jamias Williams, great compliment. Those two complemented each other really, really well. Tucker was more of a run over you, power type runner. Jemias had great speed, could cut either way, and, also had a good burst of speed if there was a big enough hole right up the middle. But, he comes to Georgia State as a transfer student athlete from the University of South Carolina, where he was a DB. He wasn't even a running back. No, he was a running back in high school, but not yet in college. But he comes to Georgia State, and eventually they see this. They move him into the backfield. And now all of a sudden, and I'm not calling one or the other, but you have this really Batman and Robin effect in the backfield. And I'm not saying which one is Batman and which one is Robin. I'm just saying we had two really good running backs, along with what quarterback Darren Granger can do running the football. And then you throw in a game like the win at Southern Miss, where Marcus Carroll steps up and rushes. I think he had over 300 yards that game, if I remember correctly. So all of a sudden, Marcus Carroll becomes a bigger part of the party last year. From an offensive standpoint, and, I love Darren Granger. I think, obviously we've seen it. He can hurt you in the air, but he can hurt you with his legs as well. It certainly helps when you've got two running backs like Tucker and Jemias like we had last year. And then obviously plenty of receivers and tight ends to throw to. I mean, offensively, again, look, we lost to Charlotte and we still scored 41 points. Scoring points has not necessarily been an issue as much as it has been defensively keeping the other team from scoring as many points.
Right.
And I've had a few people ask me in recent weeks, well, what do you expect from Georgia State this year? And I'm like, that's really a big question. And I'm sure, we'll talk about that. But the transfer portal has changed the game, quote unquote, with regards to the players that we've lost to the portal and the players that we have brought in from the portal. And from that standpoint, I think it's too early to say. Did we bring in, and how many impact players out of the transfer portal or out of the high school ranks or out of the junior college ranks, kids that are going to come in and make an immediate impact and help in making this football team and program better than it was during a 4-win season last year? That's the big question mark right now.
Yeah. And you, like I say, it's too early to say. You can't really tell right now. I mean, we're still in off-season, program, the workouts and practice be starting up pretty soon, as far as the fall. And then once we get into August, though, we'll have a good idea. September, probably have a good idea of what's going on. Is that everybody will be starting up by then. But just previewing the season for me here, Dave. What is going to be some keys, for the team? What we need to improve at, or some areas that we have to, get better at to have a more successful season?
Well, I think we know what we have with, again, Darren Granger at quarterback. So when my head hits the pillow at night, I sleep soundly knowing that we've got an experienced, quality quarterback to lead the offense. Again, it's a small sample size per se, but with regards to running the football, I would say right now, and I don't have my list in front of me, but certainly Marcus Carroll is probably going to be Batman. I mean, he should be the guy. If you were at the spring game, which we played early this year, in order to give coaches and strength and conditioning a little bit longer period during the summer to get in some more work, certainly anybody that was there at the stadium and saw KZ Adams score 4 touchdowns has got to be excited with what he brings, to the run game with regards to his speed. He may be one of the fastest guys on the roster. There are a few other names, that will be in the mix. Another name that, I'm very anxious and excited about is Jakari Carter.
Yeah.
The receiver that came in from Merrimack College. Had great numbers there. I fully expect him to be an impact player, a player who comes in and hopefully plays and produces to the level that we lost with a guy like Jamari Thrash, who was one of the portal kids that transferred out to Louisville. So yeah, Carter is another one of the guys that I'm anxious to see. Certainly there are guys receiver-wise and tight end-wise like Amon Green and Chris Bird that are back now, and they're obviously going to take on a bigger role than maybe they've had in seasons past. Right. So from an offensive standpoint, I think the other big question mark, because of the amount of players that we lost, not necessarily to the portal but to graduation, is the offensive line. We're in a position where even going into last season, the only player that was off the offensive line was Shamarius Gilmore, which in and of itself was a huge loss. That's why I think he's still playing, he's either in the XFL or the USFL. But still, we had 4 of the 5 guys starting back in the starting lineup. Well, we've lost another 2 or 3 of those guys to graduation, and I think 1 to the portal. So we're going to see some new faces starting and backing up on the offensive line, which, as Coach Elliott has told me time and time again, it starts up front and it ends up front.
That's right.
So, very similar situation on the defensive side of the football too. I was sorry to see Thomas Gore leave and enter the portal and head to Miami. We're going to have to fill that. Antavius Lane, those are some big shoes to fill. But we've got guys that will be back and that the coaching staff has brought in. And again, who is it that raises their hand and steps up and becomes an impact player to fill those slots? It's a very good schedule. I'm sure you've got it in front of you. We open up August 31 against the Rams of the University of Rhode Island, and then we're off and running. UConn is here. They're being talked about now as a possible move to the Big 12. So, that'll be interesting. Then we got to go to Charlotte. And I'd love to exact a little bit of revenge from that tough loss a year ago.
Right.
And then we open up on the road at Coastal Carolina, which is no easy task. Although the interesting thing about that series, I think for the last 4 or 5 seasons, the road team has won each game. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm excited for it. The season, the time in between seasons seems to get shorter and shorter every year because there really is no off season anymore. The minute the season ends, they do get about a week off, and then everybody's back strength and conditioning and on field, no pads, no helmets workouts and conditioning. I mean, it's really become year round. And you've got to do it if you're going to keep up with the Joneses, and that's what we're doing. We're trying to keep up with the Joneses and what is now a very, very, very good Sun Belt Conference when it comes to college football. As we all know, 7 teams went to a bowl game last year. So that's half the league.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's the conference is really good. I think people underestimate the Sun Belt. Is a very good conference. A lot of good teams in there, as you and I both know. And Georgia State, of course, you put them up there as well, and we're hoping to continue to rise up those ranks. But yeah, man, like you said, football is a year round. There is no off season. I played as well, all up to senior year, so I know. But I mean, it's as soon as you get that 1 week off or 2, and then it's like you said, strength and conditioning time. But then spring practice pretty soon, and then summer workouts, and then fall, and then you're in the season. So it's the time goes by fast, and I'm excited for the season to start, man. So just it's going to be interesting. Like I said, I'm looking forward to these games. I'm really looking forward to the UConn game. That's what I'm excited to watch. UConn has got a great squad there, and they'll be coming down here, so we'll see what happens there, man. But you mentioned the transfer portal earlier. I know everybody's got their stands on it, and how they feel about it. And it's, so where do you stand on it, man? I mean, what are your thoughts on how it's shaped college football as a whole, how it's changed it?
Well, as you know, it's changed it drastically. It's basically free agency in college athletics. But anybody who's played college sports knows that those scholarships are renewed annually anyway. It's not like when you sign on the dotted line, you're signing for 4 years. You're actually signing for 1 year, as far as I know. And it's a 4 year, you can stay over 4 years if it works out. But just the ability to pick up, I can remember, Georgia State, especially in basketball, I guess in football too, has always been involved in taking in transfers. But in the old days, if you transferred, you had to sit out a year.
Yep.
And when Georgia State, but basketball was in the old Trans-America Athletic Conference, which is now the Atlantic Sun or the ASUN. If you transferred within the conference, the rule was you had to sit out 2 years. So you didn't see a lot of kids take that route, because who wants to sit out for 2 years? The only reason I bring that up is because one of our best receivers in the last couple of years, Sam Pinckney, is now playing for Coastal Carolina. And in basketball, it was very odd this past year to be doing Georgia State and Troy and look over and we see Nelson Phillips in a Troy uniform.
Yeah.
Again, back in the day, you made that decision. You sat out for 2 years. Well, college athletics is much more open now with name, image, likeness, allowing student athletes to benefit from their name, image, likeness, and allowing a bit more what we'll call financial freedom in that area, as well as the area to transfer. And there's been some instances where, look, it's always been the proverbial question. Let's use you as an example. You're coming out of high school. You sign with X university.
Right.
Did you sign with X university because you wanted to go to that university, or did you sign because you were recruited by a certain head coach who sold you on the experience of being a student athlete at X university? So you sign, a year later, that coach leaves, which means more than likely the entire staff leaves and goes elsewhere to take another, I'm assuming, more higher paying job. Or in the instance of a lack of success, there's a coaching change made where a coach is fired. That kind of leaves you, the student athlete, hanging a little bit. Because again, the proverbial question, did you sign with the university because that's where you really wanted to go? Or did you sign because you were recruited and you wanted to play for that particular head coach? In the instance that head coach leaves, that kind of leaves you high and dry, because you don't know what your relationship is going to be with the next head coach. So again, using that as an example, I kind of like the fact that the student athlete, like the head coach, has the freedom to transfer if the situation that he signed with and signed under changes drastically like that. Now, I will say, should there be a rule that you get one free transfer, the second transfer you have to sit out a year? I don't know. That's up for debate. From a standpoint of, it's totally changed recruiting, because, I mean, I'm not going to name any names, and not necessarily players of ours, but on other teams that we have played, there's instances of players that have been, this is their third or fourth school that they've played for in 4 to 5 years. Yeah. They're just going from school to school. I don't know that that's good for college athletics. I don't, and again, this is not really my area, but when you transfer from school A to school B and then from school B to school C, how does that affect their academic ranking and their academic standing? Is that student athlete, by the time he gets to school number 3, going to be in an academic standing and at a point where he's about to graduate? Again, a rhetorical question on the academic side of things. So I don't know. I think maybe one transfer with no sit out is good, but I don't know if being able to transfer 2 and 3 times is good for college, we'll say, basketball and football.
Yeah, I agree. And I think my stance on it too, I agree with you. And I also think, but, transferring one time for specific scenarios, like, coach leaves, or, maybe because that you just realize that this school, this team isn't for you, and you just feel like you might be a better fit on another team or another school. Those instances happen. But if it's because of like a playing time or things like that, see, that's where you get into that gray area, because, players, most of the time it's because, well, you're not playing. Maybe you need to, take a different approach to your effort and how you work, things like that, just the automatic pitch to go transfer. Oh, I'm not playing. Well, what if you don't play at this other school either? You're just gonna keep hopping around, I don't like that aspect of it.
Right.
But but yeah, you have a great point, Dave. There, yeah, you made a great point on that. So
But it is the world we live in now.
it is.
And, I think it really affects, obviously, you don't have to be a sports scientist to figure this out. It really affects recruiting from the standpoint of recruiting high school athletes, because most coaches now are under such pressure to win. If you're a head coach and you've got to fill X number of spots, who do you feel more comfortable bringing in? A guy that's coming out of the transfer portal that's maybe a rising junior, or he's played 3 years and he's a rising senior and he's got experience? Or do you bring in a freshman who has no collegiate experience, obviously, and is someone that you're going to have to spend time grooming and coaching and acclimating to, let's just say, Division I college athletics? If you're the head coach and you're under pressure, you're going to go with the guys who you think can come in and make an immediate impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it hurts the high school kids that are trying to come out and get recruited as well. It clogs it up a little bit.
It does. It really does, man. And it's crazy. I mean, and I can say it's different from the NFL in the aspect of, like and these coaches in the NFL are under pressure too, but I feel like college is much more. It's like a thin line, like, because there isn't really, you can't talk about rebuilding and like it. You're on a tight ticket, and these like you have to win, because this isn't a job. Well, for the coaches, it's for the players, it's not, but it's different in the NFL in that aspect. So it is much more pressure, and so it's crazy, man. But
well, the thing about the NFL, in just about every case, you've got a head coach, but then you have a general manager who, in most cases, controls the roster.
Right.
So you, as head coach of an NFL team, I'm sure some coaches have more input than others, but someone else is deciding what your roster is going to look like.
Right.
And you got to play with the players that have been provided for you. Whereas in college, as far as I know, there's nobody telling the Georgia State coaching staff, you've got to bring in this person, or I'm bringing in, our coaching staff working together decides who they want to recruit and bring into the program.
Yeah, absolutely.
No. And you're right, the NFL is much more of a business from that standpoint than college athletics is, although sometimes I think college athletics is right there as well. And you look at a conference like the Big 12 or the Southeastern Conference, not so much player personnel-wise, but in every other aspect of the way the programs are run, they're very much run like professional sports. They're all chasing television money and ticket money, and little by little we see things that we see rules and barriers that used to exist that are coming down, whether or not you're selling alcohol at on-campus facilities to create more revenue, or various things to chase additional revenue streams. Well,
right.
That just screams professional sports.
Basically,
to me.
Yeah, it does. I mean, then you talk, the television deals. You got schools moving around. Especially with Texas, Oklahoma. I'm sure you know about that. They're going to join the SEC, and then you got these teams in the Big 12. It's college football is heading in a new direction. It's going to be interesting to see, Dave.
Well, television is the tail that wags the dog.
It is.
And keep your fingers crossed, if you're a college football fan, if we ever get to the day that television can't sustain the kind of money that they have put into the product, what happens?
Right.
It's a rhetorical question. If ESPN or CBS or ABC gets to the point where they make a decision to, or they can no longer infuse the kind of money that they're putting into the product, college athletics, we'll say college football and college basketball, what happens to the product? And the landscape of college athletics, as you and I know it and have seen it transcend.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's heading definitely in a different direction here, but as far as we're concerned with Georgia State, I'm looking forward to the season this year, man. And I'm excited to see how things turn out for us. It's going to be exciting. It's glad to have some of our guys back and new guys coming in. So see how that turns out, Dave. But man, we appreciate you coming on the show today, man, and giving us your insight into Georgia State football and sports as well in general. Thank you, Dave, again for coming on.
Well, I appreciate it anytime, and I'm looking forward to it as well. Got to get off to a good start this year. It's a very competitive schedule. It's a good league. It's a really, really good league. We know how good it is in college basketball and college baseball, which we just got finished with. Got 4 teams into the NCAA baseball, but it's a really, really good college football league, especially with the 4 new schools that came in last year. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm looking forward to it. And it'll be here before you know it.
It sure will. It'll be here before we know it. So, but yeah, Dave, just thank you again for coming on, and make sure you guys check us out here. YouTube, we're on Spotify, every other podcast platform. We'll definitely have Dave back on before the season to preview again Georgia State football and throughout the season as well, hopefully, and get to talk to you, man. And I'll be at some of these games, man. So I'm excited. Go Panthers, Dave.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. All right.